I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about coping with stress. Stress is a part of daily life. All of us face it, whether it's a difficulty and stress with a boss or a job, family, finances, all of us are faced with stress. And in today's environment, we believe that there is so much more stress in our lives. But in truth, our lives have become tremendously more complicated because the times in which we are living are moving toward a new time of understanding and a new era of enlightenment. Because of that, we're challenged with dealing with the problems and the challenges of stress each and every day. Stress is something that relates to us on the inner part of our being as much as it does in the external ways of our lives. We know that stress has tremendous impacts upon our physical body. We know that stress can cause heart disease, can cause ulcers, and can cause a myriad of physical illnesses. We also know that stress can hinder us psychologically and spiritually by shackling our mind and keeping us from dealing with the circumstances and situations that come into our lives. One of the major causes of stress in our lives has to do with fear. We define in metaphysics fear as false evidence appearing real, F-E-A-R. False evidence appearing real. The things that we fear in life are non-realities. The things that we fear in life paralyze us and keep us from doing the things that we want. The fears of our lives keep us in the place where we are. And as we deal with stressful circumstances and situations, when we add our fears in mind, in thought, and in life, we become paralyzed and we become immovable, and we are not able to deal with the life in which we find ourselves. The secondary cause to stress in our lives is that we believe that things ought to be the way that we want them to be, the way we believe they ought to be. And in reality, life is an experience of understanding, of growing, and of coming to the awareness of who and what we are. This process has nothing to do with the way that things ought to be in our minds. It has everything to do with the way that we respond to the circumstances and situations in our lives. We live in our minds and not in the world. That's a fundamental of New Thought. We live in our minds and not in the world. We believe that we live in the world because we can see it, because we believe that we have jobs and houses and families and responsibilities. And indeed we do. But we are spiritual beings in a physical experience. And this physical experience is not meant to defeat us. It is not meant to destroy us. It is not meant to do anything except provide for us opportunities to spiritually grow and understand ourselves and the divine realities of life in a better or more positive way. In order to do this, we need to change our way of thinking. We need to put away and put aside the fears that we have in life, the false evidence that we see in life, and we need to embrace a new way of thinking. We also need to accept things the way that they are. The circumstances and situations of my life, of your life, and of the entire world may not be what we would like them to be at this moment. They may not be exactly what we would like to see in the world. Your life may not be what you would like it to be, but it is what it is. If you are faced with challenges, if you are faced with difficulties, they are there. If you are faced with illness, the illness is there. If you are faced with limit or lack, the limit or lack is there. But the reality is that as you change your way of thinking about every circumstance and situation, the power that that circumstance and situation has over your life can release its hold, and you can be guided and directed to deal with the circumstances of life. It doesn't mean that the circumstances will change. It doesn't even mean that the circumstances need to change. What needs to change is your way of thinking about your life and the environment and the circumstances in which you find yourself. If we give up the fundamentals of fear, that is, false evidence appearing real, if we understand that all of the experiences that we have in life, that every day and all of the things that we're going through are transient experiences that are created for our spiritual understanding and growth, then we understand that there is nothing that we need to fear. There is nothing that can hurt us or harm us, that the environment and life and spirit and divine intelligence are the universal friends of all of our being and all of our experience. And when we do that, we cast out the fears and we give up wanting life to be the way that we think it should be. We accept it the way that it is, and we begin to think about it in a totally different way. If there is an illness in our lives, our physical bodies may be ill, but we know that life is eternal and that the physical body is only a transient experience. Therefore, we know that as we change our way of thinking about the power that that illness has over us, we can change the processes of our mind, and when we change the process of our mind, the quality of our life can be changed. In this process of coping with stress and dealing with the challenges of daily life, we are invited to enter into an activity of right thinking and right mental balance. In order to do that, we need to exercise and be aware of the processes through which our minds operate. If your mind is one that sees negativity in life, that thinks of life in a negative way, you will create a negative vibration, a negative outcome, and the process of your mind will continue to be negative. If, on the other hand, you see the negatives of life and the positives of life, and you see beyond the circumstances and situations of this physical life, you see beyond what you see with your human eyes and hear with your human ears, and claim something that is eternal and something that transcends the physical, then wonderful and magnificent things begin to happen. We can begin to see a checkbook that hasn't enough money in the bank to cover the bills as a negative. We can begin to see that as lack of resources, lack of abundance. We can see the bills that are piling up as outflow of money and obligations that we have, and we can begin the process of thinking about those things, those bills and that checkbook and our bank balance in a negative way. Or we can see the fact that when we have bills, it means that we have something. If we have bills, we have a house, we have electricity, we have cars, we have food, we have things that these bills being paid bring into our lives. Many, many people have no bills, and they have no resources. They have no shelter. They have no cars. The way that we think about the negative experiences in our life can change the way that our life is, because we live in our minds and not in the world. And so as we change the process of mind, we change our way of thinking, we align our way of thinking with reality, with truth, then wonderful and magnificent things begin to happen. As we begin to see all of our life experiences in a positive way, we cast out fear, we cast out the idea that life ought to be the way we think it should be, and we're able to deal with circumstances and situations in a positive and uplifting way. By changing the way that you think, you can change the quality of your life. We believe in the connective consciousness. The fundamental of metaphysics and New Thought is the connectiveness of our consciousness with the consciousness of God or divine mind. And when those two are connected, then we are given divine guidance and direction. We are able to deal with circumstances and situations. We are able to overcome any problem or challenge that we have, because the infinite resources of the universe are available to us. The peace and the prosperity, the health and the balance, all of the things that we want in our lives are open and available to us. And with this process, with this change of idea, with the change of the way that we think, and with the dynamic of mind, we can not only cope with the stresses of life, but the stresses of life can bring us positive experiences. Because as we overcome each experience, each negative experience, each pain, each suffering, each limit, each lack, and each illness in our life, we become more aware of the power that we have to deal with the circumstances and situations of life. Right thinking is aligning our thought processes with the divine processes of infinite intelligence. Ernest Holmes, Mary Baker Eddy, Charles Fillmore, Nora Brooks, and a myriad of other teachers and philosophers of this age and of the last 200 years have brought to us truth in this wonderful way, that by changing the way that we think, we can change the quality of our mind, the quality of our life. We'd like to invite you to pause with us at this point of the program, to join with us in a reflection, a moment of prayer. We believe in prayer as a centering force, the ability that we have to bring ourselves into consciousness with God. We begin by saying, we join our thoughts and our hearts and minds with the infinite intelligence of God. And as we do this, we release the fears of life and the ideas that things ought to be the way that we think they are. And we ask not that circumstances and situations be changed, but that our mind and way of thinking be changed. We ask these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
That was a wonderful presentation about stress and the fact that fear brings through more stress than any other factor of our lives is so obvious in life.
And we're fearful of so many things.
Yes.
We're fearful of everything. And some people are even fearful of God. And we're fearful of the universe. We're fearful of the world in so many circumstances. And so what we're saying simply is to put aside those fears and to put aside that false evidence.
Yes, it's a major tragedy that people fear God because God is love. And he sent his only son, Jesus, to be the divine way shower to show us that love.
That was a tremendous concept that Mary Baker Eddy, the foundress of Christian Science, brought in the last century, and that was Jesus as the way shower, as the way shower for the way that we should live, the way that we should think, and the place to which we were going to go. And the whole concept is to bring into our thought process the thinking of God or the thinking of the Christ consciousness and that awareness. And when we do that, that way shower puts aside the fear for us and puts aside the way things ought to be.
Yes, we've been taught that the greatest attribute he showed was that of joyousness. And of course, as being a master of development, he knew what was in store for him, but he just didn't know if he would be able to accomplish what he came in to accomplish. And he said very humbly, and if I be lifted up, will draw all men to me. And that showed his humility of spirit. And yet he knew that he would succeed, and indeed he did.
And the circumstances and situations of his life were not the influences. He was never bothered by what took place around him.
Yes.
His thinking, and what we talk about so often is centering ourselves in that Christ consciousness. And he was able to center himself, as he said so often, in the consciousness of being one with the Father.
Right.
He said that he was one with the Father.
Yes.
And the admonition and the challenge is for us, too, to be one with the Father. And when we align ourselves with that way of thinking, the circumstances don't matter anymore. And certainly in his life, he was faced with tremendous challenge and difficulty, but it was never the challenge or the difficulty that was important. What was important was what he taught in the process of not changing the situation, but changing the way that he thought about the situation. And in every situation, he thought that he and God were one, and that whatever happened would be all right. It may not be pleasant, and it may not be what he wanted, and it may not have been the experience, certainly, that he wanted, and it's the same in our lives. Things happen in our life experience that would not be of our own choosing, but it happens because it gives us the opportunity of going through that problem and growing through the problem, and the problem isn't the issue.
Yes.
What's the issue is what's taking place within us.
How we resolve that problem and how we accept it and live with it on a day-to-day basis. And as you said so well, we're living without fear. If we negate the fear, then we can face anything, because we know that this is something we're needing to face, and that we will grow through it, and that we will evolve to a higher level by thus living.
And soul evolution is the whole purpose. And life in its purpose, again, our fundamental teaching is that life is the school of the soul. And so there is nothing that we're here to do except to learn. And that there is no way to go backwards. There's only the ability to go forward. And none of us has the ability to go backward. We're all in the process of ever moving forward in our understanding.
Ever onward and upward, hopefully. Sometimes we plateau and we stay on the same level for a while, but that's okay too. In the church where I was trained, we called it open key periods. And we all have open key periods when we're not forced. We don't have that impetus to get things accomplished. We just do, and we can make choices. Because as we teach at Christ Church, we each have something we came through to accomplish in a major way, and then minor things that we came through to accomplish. And usually those are toward our character development. It's also living a life of service. And so as we live in that way, and live a life of service to the very best of our ability in the places in which we're placed from time to time as we go through life, and then to do our best in those circumstances, then we're following the basic pattern that we came in to accomplish. And I think when we have dis-ease, what is dis-ease? Is that dis-ease. So we are not following our basic pattern, or we're just developing according to how we karmically planned. And only God knows what that plan would be unless we're able to access our higher self and the Akashic records. And then through meditation and quietness, we can do that. And we can't have a really good meditation if we're filled with fear. We have to be relaxed, and that's why the deep breathing is so important, because before meditation, it's good, just as you teach, to have the time of breathing deeply, inhaling and exhaling regularly with rhythm, because that just relaxes our physical body. We have to leave the physical aside and live from our higher inner self in order to accomplish what we wish to accomplish.
And as you so well said, we're here for the process of learning and coming to an understanding, a deeper understanding of who and what we are. And the process of the life experiences have brought us to exactly where we need to be to learn the lessons that we need to learn. And so often we think that life has dealt us a horrible, horrible blow, or that something terrible has happened. But in fact, all of the circumstances of our life come to fulfill a learning need that we have.
Yes, and if we can remember that and not be fearful, that's the major factor in living a spiritual life, is to not be fearful. And if we have faith, we're not fearful.
And there's nothing to be fearful of, because the one thing that we know is all of life is changing, that we're moving through this process of physical life, and that this physical life is only a process of learning. It's like one day in school, if we go back to our school days. And so often in our school days, we felt traumatized, and we felt that things would never resolve, and that difficulties were facing us at every side. And yet we lived through those experiences, and they taught us something. They taught us how to be the people that we are.
Yes, and it seems that wherever we turn now, we're reading about detach and release, and we hear speakers talk about detach and release. And I think that's an energy that's coming through from the inner planes, because that's the keynote of today, is to detach and release. And if we can do that in truth, then we're not fear-filled. We don't experience fear in our lives.
And we're able to detach from the stressful experiences of life.
Yes.
And as we detach from those stressful experiences, then we're able to have clarity of thought, and we're able to be guided and directed to do the things that we need to do. And again, the things that we're guided and directed to do may not be what we would have chosen to do, but we will be guided, and we will be directed, and we will learn the lessons that we need to learn. So all of the stresses really create opportunities for us, and it's our own mind that creates the great difficulty of the learning experience.
Usually resistance. If we're resisting, then we're creating problems for ourselves. And as long as we resist, we're not in tune, we're not flowing with that deep divine spirit within. We're not flowing with divinity.
And that issue of resistance, too, creates stress. And what is stress caused from? But the resistance of circumstance and situation, two opposites opposing each other. And so often the opposing forces are the way things are and the way we think things ought to be. And it creates stress for us in our lives.
Yes, and sometimes I dialogue with the higher energy within myself. And once I was going through a serious personality problems with my family. And I heard the words in my meditation, resist not evil. And I was trying to make some sense out of my relationship with those members of my family. And so when I heard the words, resist not evil, I said, well, they're not evil, and they were not evil. And the words that came to me was that I was making it into evil. The evil is being created within my own consciousness because I'm resisting too much. So it's not so the voice wasn't telling me that they were evil. It was saying that I was creating the evil. And I think, and that was a wonderful lesson, because we need to know that we create thought forms. When we resist, we're creating certain thought forms. When we go with the flow of life and with God's plan for us, then we're creating a different type of thought forms.
And we live in our minds and not in the world. And so it is that process of mind that creates for us the environment in which we find ourselves.
Exactly. And we have to always remember that we are responsible for what we think and for our actions and our thoughts. And as we've said in other times, all that is expressed in the Akashic records, and it's expressed in our heart chakra. So it's there, and we can access it whenever we like, and get our guidance. But to go with the flow of God's own energy is just to stay relaxed and attuned to God the Whole, and to use any guidelines that we know have been brought to our attention.
And allow ourselves to be receptive to that new and different way of thinking.
Yes, and not only receptive, but to go with it, and not resist, not hang on to the old things and the unpleasant things and the negative things that have happened in our lives. It's hanging on to those, and that's part of the detach. Not hanging on is to detach. So detach and release. To detach ourselves from them, to release. So it's when we live from the higher self that we're not filled with dis-ease, and we're not troubled mentally, and we're able to just be and do whatever work we've been given to do, whether it's menial physical labor or writing or working as professionally, whatever that may be, or raising a family. Then we're happy enough with what has been given to us to do, because we know that we've helped decide what is to have been given to us.
That we have a part in what's happening in our lives, and that we have a part in bringing about the life experience that we have. And even though those life experiences sometimes are negative, that they're being brought through for a purpose for us and for those around us. And so often we want to know, we want to understand everything, and we want everything to be, again, the way we think it ought to be. And that's not the way life is. And so often we don't know the reason, and we don't know the cause, but we do know that in the midst of every circumstance and situation, there will be a way, and that regardless of how stressful the environment is, or how hurtful or painful, or whether it's an illness or a challenge, or whether it's emotional or spiritual, material, whatever it is that comes into our lives, that we have chosen it, and that it's brought for a need, and that we need only to embrace it and to open ourselves to the fact that this is an experience, and put aside the fear.
Yes, and we've been taught, in fact, that before we come in to life for an incarnation on earth, our high self, our guardian angel, and a lord or angel of karma, which would be of the angelic realm, helps decide what we're going to accomplish for that given lifetime. And that's part of the staying calm and looking within, because then we can see what it was we came in to accomplish, and we feel more comfortable and at ease with what's happening in our life, whether it's something that's unpleasant normally, or that we wouldn't choose to have to experience, but we realize that we chose that experience, and we came to work through those emotions and those circumstances, and we never know how it affects other people in their lives too, our reaction to adversity, because we know how inspiring it is to see someone who in adversity stays calm and peaceful. And that's part of it, is how our life reflects into the lives of others. And that might be exactly why we chose to experience an illness, which wouldn't be curable, because it's something we planned and brought through. And we have to accept that certain things are, as you say so often, one thing we all know we're going to do is die, and one thing we know we're going to experience unpleasantness in life. We're also going to experience a lot of good in life. So if we know that life is a balance, then we don't get stressed out when we have the unpleasant things happen, because we know they can be expected, we know we can bear them, and we know that we have the inner resources with which to bear them.
And if we're willing to die, not only at the end of life, but we're willing to die to circumstances, to situations, and to experiences in life, because as we learn that in death, as something dies or passes out of our life, including our life, then something else comes in to take its place. And it is that normal outflow and inflow that is universal and is always true. And if we can understand and be willing to let go of things, we can let go of the stresses of life too. And then we let go of even the stress of worrying about the end of our life, or even those who want to worry about what comes next in the process, because it is all adding stress in the process of fear. When in fact, if we understand that these transitions come, the changes come, and that we move from place to place, then there is no need to fear, there is no need to want it to be a certain way, and we're able to deal with the stressful situations in a positive way.
And we can rest assured that if we feel fear or stress, then we need to change our view of what it is we're facing and how we're facing it, and the facts that are coming forth in our lives. Because, as you say so well, we live in our minds. So we have the capability of changing how we think about those circumstances. And if we're feeling the fear or stress, then we know that we need to change our viewpoint.
And that's a good point, Iris. You made a wonderful point there. If we're feeling stress in our lives, and if we're stressed a lot, we need to change our way of thinking.
Yeah. And that's, if we do that, then we're using our inner resources, our spiritual resources, instead of just using our conscious mind.
And those spiritual resources, together with conscious mind, can change our life dramatically.
Yes. And that's why we're here, to change in those ways.
We are very much here to change, and Reverend Freelander and I have been sharing with you some concepts for confident living, and we hope that you found them to be useful and that you're able to release and let go of the stress in your life. We look forward to seeing you next time.